Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Best Ever You show. I'm your host, Elizabeth Hamilton-Guarino, here with co-host Dr. Katie Eastman and guest Matthew Cossolotto. Matthew, how are you today?
I'm doing great, and I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you. Katie, how are you?
Oh, I'm wonderful. Love these interviews. Meeting such great, interesting people. It's a blast.
Yeah, we can keep nodding. We've been doing this a long time, haven't we, Katie?
We have, and it never gets dull. Never.
Oh, it's so much fun. And we have another guest on with books. And one of the things that I love about guests with books is our audience rallies around those books. So Matthew, he needs your book club, everybody, over on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Goodreads, all that stuff. Make sure you buy his books and review his books. That's so important as an author these days. You find us begging our friends and family and strangers, everybody to review over on Amazon or Barnes and Noble and all that. And it's just so important because the algorithms mess with us these days. So anyway, Matthew, welcome. I'm going to read a little bit about you if you don't mind. Matthew has had an extraordinary career as a speechwriter at the very highest levels, working with top officials at NATO headquarters in Brussels, the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives. I want to know how you did all this. I could sit here for hours. The Chancellor of UCLA, senior executives at Fortune 100 companies, and even serving as a legislative aide to former Congressman Leon Panetta. His work has quite literally helped shape messages in some of the most influential rooms in the world. I mean, what can't we learn today from Matthew as our guest, right? Everybody always wants their message out and to be heard. And boy, that's impressive. So you're here today to talk with us about your books. You're the author of Harness Your PromisePower, Change Your Life, Transform the World. And then our other book that we love from you that many of us probably have in our library over there, The Joy of Public Speaking, because a lot of us have learned how to do our best public speaking that we can do from, you and your book. So I appreciate you putting that book out for sure. And I'm anxious to learn about your other one. And then you've got, I didn't do my research on this, so I apologize, Matthew, but have you written Harness Your Habit Force, or are you going to write that one?
I have a long story and a short version of the story about that. There's a book called Habit Force that I've written.
Yes.
That is the book that was the result of the promise I made to my mother, which I'm sure we're going to touch on. I'm updating Habit Force, and I'm turning it into Harness Your Habit Force.
Got it.
And that's coming out probably the end of this year, something like that. I want to let the Harness Your PromisePower book have a little bit of the spotlight for a while, for several months, hopefully. And then I'll move into Harness Your Habit Force. And that would be the third book in my trilogy, the Personal Empowerment Trilogy.
I love it.
Yeah,
and
The
maybe
Joy of
that
Public
book,
Speaking, Harness Your PromisePower, and Harness Your Habit Force.
and maybe your habit book will live right alongside Atomic Habits too, because that'd be a good place to live.
Yeah, that wouldn't be bad.
I'd like that too. And so at the heart of your work is a simple but profound idea that success is an inside job. And through your writing and speaking and your personal empowerment programs, you help us all understand the life-changing impact of making and keeping promises, especially the ones that we make to ourselves. So today we're going to talk about what you call promise power, how a single promise can shape your entire life, and how each of us can begin making more intentional, meaningful choices starting right now. Take it away, Katie.
So, Matthew, you alluded to it earlier, but you made a wonderful, very sacred promise to your mom that you talked about in your book, Harnessing Your Promise Power. And can you tell us a little bit more about that and what the promise was and how it's impacted your life?
I love talking about it, and I'm happy to talk about it. I've written about it. I speak about it. I mention it in almost every presentation I give because were it not for that promise, I don't think I'd be giving presentations like I'm doing now. I don't think I'd be writing these books. There's a little bit of a preamble to the promise, and I think it's worth mentioning, but it's too long to really go into. But basically, my mother had been encouraging me to write a book about habit force. And the reason she was interested in that is I told her I had this idea about two side-by-side acronyms, we'll call them, or acrostics, the word failure and the word success. Both have 7 letters. Coincidentally enough, and improbably enough, these two powerful opposite words in our culture and our language have 7 letters. And the reason that was significant, and I won't go into a lot of detail, but I had read a book, I'm sure you've heard of it and read it, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And I read that book after having failed to do something in my life that I'd love to tell you about, but I'll skip over that. And I was reading up on personal empowerment and self-help books to get some insight into what happened in my own life. And I thought, if there were 7 habits of highly effective people, I wonder if there are 7 habits of highly ineffective people. What are the habits that hold people back? And I thought that would be really interesting. And what would I call those habits? I would call them failure habits or failure traps. And then it hit me that that word failure has 7 letters. And then it was like a multiple epiphany. The word success also has 7 letters. So I told my mother about this. It was just a kind of a hodgepodge of ideas. And she said, you should write a book about that. I said, really? She said, yeah, that's amazing. That's two of these 2 powerful words. You should write a book. Now, at the time, I did not think of myself as a self-help author, or even think about it. I was writing speeches and coaching on public speaking, but I didn't think I was a self-help author. But she kept reminding me of this idea for the book. And so that's kind of the short version of it. I was able to take her to Paris, and she came to Paris for the first time in her life. And a few months after that trip, she was diagnosed with cancer. It had spread. And the last time I saw her, I went back and forth from New York to California many times. And the last time I was able to see her was very close to the end, and I'm going to get choked up. I made her a promise. I said, Mom, I want to promise you that I'm going to finish writing that book that we've been talking about for a few years. And I want to dedicate it to your memory. And her face lit up and she shook her finger at me. She said, you do that, Matthew. You do that. This makes me very happy, she said. So I knew I had crossed the Rubicon. I knew I had to write that book, even though I wasn't sure how I was going to do it or whether it was really something. It was outside my comfort zone, let me put it that way. But I knew I had to do it. So the next few years I was working on it. And finally I came up with a way to do this book. It's kind of a thin volume called Habit Force. It has these 2 side-by-side acronyms, failure, success, lots of other ideas in there. But for each habit of failure, there's an equal but opposite habit of success. So what I was hoping to do is let people know, if you find yourself stuck, if you're not accomplishing what you think you could achieve in your life, if you're falling short of your potential, these 7 habits of failure are probably holding you back. And what you need to do is recognize them, reject them, and replace them with the counterpart success habit. Just to give you a quick example, and then we can move on, but the F in failure stands for finger pointing. So if you find yourself finger pointing, making excuses, you're not going to go anywhere. You're not going to succeed. You're not going to reach your potential. Benjamin Franklin was famous for saying that a person who is good at making excuses is seldom good at anything else. And so you have to become aware of that. Personal change requires becoming aware of, your personal awareness of what you're thinking, how you're behaving. You need to replace that finger pointing habit with the S in success, which stands for shoulder responsibility. You have to take responsibility for your life, 100% responsibility. That's what Jack Canfield says, who did the foreword to my book on Promise Power. So take responsibility. I won't go through all 7. We'd be here all day. But that's the basic idea. For every habit of failure, there's an equal but opposite habit of success. And those 7 habits of success reinforce each other, and they empower you. They're empowering habits. And the same way on the failure side, all those habits of failure reinforce each other. And if you do all of those, most people don't do all of them. If you do all of them, you're probably in an institution somewhere. You're not doing anything, they reinforce each other and you're not able to function, basically. But the idea is become aware of each one. Maybe you do 2 or 3, and you can move on to the success habit. And my mother loved this idea, and I give her a lot of credit for asking me, as mothers sometimes do, nagging me. What are you going to do about that book? Are you doing the book? So I made the promise, and that has changed my life.
I love it. I'm gonna take you back for a minute, kindergarten. I need to know. Katie and I always ask that question of people because 'cause I'd like to know, and I think our younger listeners also would like to know your path of how you got to be doing some of those things that you were doing, because that's a high level, that's hard to do, and that is very interesting to tell us the how. But first, tell you know, in 5 minutes, go,
Yeah.
take us back to kindergarten. Who were you in kindergarten? And then how did you end up doing some of the things that you did? Because that's interesting.
Yeah. Well, kindergarten, in fact, all of my childhood, there's a theme, and that is we moved around a lot. So in kindergarten, I remember my teacher was Miss Tingling, and I was up in Napa Valley. My brother, older brother and sister were with me, and my mother was working in San Francisco, and she had friends, very nice people, who took care of us. So we were like almost like foster kids, but we weren't because it wasn't formal. But I went to a small school in Napa Valley. I believe it was on Coombsville Road. I was the youngest of the three siblings, and my sister Patty, I dedicate this book, Harness Your Promise Power, to my sister. And the dedication reads, to my big sister Patty, she always kept her promises. So we were the three kids were together during my childhood. We moved back to San Francisco at some point. I think I spent a year in Napa. We went back to San Francisco. We lived in different places. My mother was a single parent working. And to make ends meet, we moved, I guess. I don't know all the details. But if you want to know who I was when I was in kindergarten, I think I was a shy little boy.
Really?
Had a little kid. I know my brother and sister were helpful to me because we moved from place to place. Eventually, I think I learned how to find some comfort in that, and I could become more self-reliant, I guess might be the expression that Ralph Waldo Emerson might have used. But self-reliance, I became uh, able to go from school to school and make new friends. And I think that helped me over the years. And I did a bit of that moving around. I think we must have moved. Wasn't it wasn't because we moved in the military or something, because some people
Yeah.
have that experience who are the army brats or something. We just moved. And I think I must have moved 10 or 12 times before I was in high school. And so I went from school to school, made new friends, lost old friends, but I could adjust to these things. And I think it helped me as I pursued a career in which I moved around a little bit from place to place and opportunity to opportunity. So it's hard for me to really analyze it, but I think in my own mind, I think it was helpful, or at least I was happy to find, the silver lining to what would otherwise have been maybe a little bit traumatic to
Yeah.
move around like that. But we had a pretty close knit group of kids. We were actually latchkey kids for many years. We weren't the original latchkey kids, but I did rely on my brother and my sister. When I came home from school, Patty in particular was in charge. She was like the drill instructor telling us what to do because we had to clean up the place, to do our homework. She was in charge. And before mom came home, and we would help start getting dinner ready, clean the kitchen and everything. We didn't always do it to her standards, but we, as the youngest, I dragged my feet. We watched TV, but we listened to Patty. And so I dedicated this book to her because she kept a couple of really important promises to me. One of them was she gave me a place to live when I didn't want to move again and go to a different high school somewhere else. She said she would let me live at her place with just she and her husband. And that was a big help to me. I moved around even after that. I lived for a while with one of my teachers and her family in a tent. I just moved because my parents really weren't there anymore in Napa Valley. So I wanted to stay there.
How
That's
did you
not, that's more than you wanted to know, I'm
No, it's
sure.
not, because where I want you to go with it next is then how did you go from that to, speech writing, and, take us into like how you got, because that's not like you had a foundation of, there already. Must have had to really work for what you've achieved. Like
Well,
really
I was the
work.
first kid in I was the first kid in the family to graduate from college.
Yeah, I imagine
The
so.
teacher I mentioned where I lived was my English teacher, and I was busy reading. I don't know what it was. I always had a penchant, I think, for the language, for English. Uh, I remember when we diagrammed language sentences in English class, knew the object of the preposition and the indirect object. I just knew that stuff and I was good at it. But somewhere along the way, and relates to how I got into speech writing, I learned the name Theodore Sorensen. Ted Sorensen was
It's awesome.
JFK's speechwriter and
Mhm.
counselor. And somewhere in my early years, teenage years, I heard about him and I was intrigued about that. I liked writing already, but this idea of being a counselor to the president and being a speechwriter intrigued me. And at some point later in my life, I had been a speechwriter for years on Capitol Hill and then in the private sector. I was able to meet Ted Sorensen at a speechwriters conference in New York City. It was a small group, and I didn't do this on purpose, but somehow I kind of managed to sit down right next to him.
That's
I don't know exactly how that worked, but I was sitting right across from Ted Sorensen, and I told him the story about being inspired by him to become a speechwriter. And at that point, I was pretty well established. And you could tell he was moved by that. And I imagine if someone told me that at some point in the future, I would be moved by it too. If someone's inspired to become a speechwriter or an author because of me, that
yeah.
would be quite impressive to me. So I'll tell you one story that you'll like about Ted Sorensen. He gave a little talk. This was late in his life. I think he passed away a few years after this conference, but it was just a luncheon, really. And he gave a talk, and then one of the speechwriters, as most of us would want to ask this question, did you write those famous words in JFK's inaugural address? Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. And so his answer was beautiful. He said, I get that question a lot, and I'll give you the same answer I always give. Ask not.
Mm.
And we cracked up. He'd never answered it. I don't think he's ever answered. He never took credit, but ask not was a great answer. And that was, he was a man of enormous humor. He was very funny giving his talk, and he's wrote a book called Counselor after that, and I've read that book. So he has written. He wanted to be a counselor as well as being a speechwriter, and I guess
Yeah.
I fancied myself doing that. I don't know if I ever achieved it, but
I have one more, Katie. And yeah, it's pretty fascinating to be able to do all that. Isn't that interesting how life graces you in those interesting and unexpected ways? But what the other question I have for you, who was the first speech that you tested out being a speechwriter on to see if you were any good at it? Like, were you in high school writing like student council speeches or
no.
how'd that go for you? I mean, were you just like, I'm a speechwriter and I just am naturally gifted at this, or did you have to work at that too and hone your craft? Or
Yeah, it's honing the craft. I was invited to give a talk at a speechwriters conference. I think it was in Chicago, and I referred to speechwriting as the accidental profession because it's not something that, at least in my era, that you went to school for. You didn't get a degree in speechwriting. It was all trial and error. I did write some speeches when I worked for Leon Panetta. When he was a junior member of Congress, I was right out of college. I wrote a few speeches. Some of them were terrible. I tried some humor, Leon Panetta was quite he's one of the great public servants ever, I think. So happy and proud to have worked for him. And he went on to become Secretary of Defense, CIA director, chief of staff at the White House, OMB director, did a lot of things after I worked for him. I don't take credit for anything that he's achieved after I worked for him. But it's amazing, you just try things. When you're on a personal staff on Capitol Hill, you're asked to write a bunch of things, constituent letters, statements for the floor statements, testimony for committee, background notes, some speeches when he's invited to go out and speak. I wrote a few speeches for myself. I spoke a few times when I was on his staff. He was on a presidential commission on foreign language and international studies, and I had just come back really a year or two before that from a junior year abroad in Sweden. So I always mention that. I say, if you have a chance to do study abroad, jump at the chance. If you have a kid or a grandchild, let them study abroad. It's just a fantastic experience. So I actually had that experience and was able to use it in my work almost immediately because Leon was on this presidential commission on foreign language and international studies. So yeah, I wrote a few speeches then, graduated a little bit after that. I worked for the Speaker of the House, Jim Wright from Texas, and I wrote speeches for him. That was a challenge because he fancied himself, and for good reason, he fancied himself an excellent writer. And he was. He was from the old school about speech writing. He loved to give these stemwinders, and he would speak not for hours, but he would just, but he had whole sections of speeches in his memory banks. I remember there was an interparliamentary union event with a bunch of members of parliament from all over Europe, mostly. And he sat there. I was right next to him, and he wrote down like 3 scribbles. I could barely read them. I said, what is he doing over there? And he had like a speech, and he just went into volumes on each little scribble about education. You know, if you just say topic, he would just move on. He'd talk about education for about 10 minutes if you wanted him to. Anyway, yeah, he was a tough guy to write speeches for. I managed to write some that he liked, and some he wasn't too happy with, I guess. But from that experience, I moved on to writing speeches in the private sector and for CEOs and other top executives. It's it can be humbling.
So one of the things that really strikes me about your story and what you've written is many of the listeners and all of us struggle at times with follow through. And you clearly were self-reliant as a kiddo, and you clearly followed through on your dreams, your visions, your goals. And I wish you would talk to people about what's the difference between pushing yourself and making a promise to yourself.
Well, yeah. So I mentioned something I failed to do, and they're connected. These two things they intersect. I was still working on Capitol Hill, and I had this idea. And I had a friend, and we got together for about 6 months, and like once a week, and we kicked around this idea. And it was to create a cable TV channel called Comedy TV. And we had all these ideas about what we'd have a round table of comedians talking about current events and all these things that are now, kind of passé, it's been done. But when we were talking about it, Comedy Central did not exist. We went to a lawyer friend of mine at a big law firm. I think it was Arnold and Porter in Washington. And we said, how do we incorporate comedy TV? We didn't know anything about doing this. And so he started to draw up these papers and how are we going to invest in this? And I thought, well, maybe we could go to big comedians of the day and get funding or something. But this lasted about 6 months. And then I talked myself out of it. I said to myself and to some friends, and they told me too, but I would tell myself, what do you know about doing this? Who do you think you are? You don't know anything about raising money to do comedy. You've got other things to do. You're working for the Speaker of the House. Don't complicate your life with. So I talked myself out of it, and I write about it in Habit Force and Harness Your Habit Force to come. I blew it because I didn't pursue it.
Wow. Yeah.
I just dropped the ball, and we just stopped talking about it. And you won't believe this, but it's the truth. I saw in the newspaper a story about a couple of guys who were going to start a comedy TV channel. I think that became Comedy Central. And I literally thought it was about us. I thought somebody got wind of our idea, and then much to my chagrin, it was not about us. It was about these 2 other guys who started Comedy Central, I think. I tell the story now that I could have been Jon Stewart's boss. I could have been like head of comedy TV. But anyway, there's a lot of great ideas, but I didn't pursue it. And then that got me going on self-help books and 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Tony Robbins, and all that, Awaken the Giant Within, and all these ways to, how can I be all that I can be? And this was like in the mid-80s. And then I had this idea for this book about failure and success. And I think, looking back, I think I made a promise to my mother to lock me into doing it. I don't know that it was conscious. I don't think it was a conscious decision, but it locked me in. Like I said before, I'd crossed the Rubicon. Failure was not an option. I couldn't just drop the ball. I couldn't just say, oh, I'm not going to do that now. It's too much trouble.
Right.
Like comedy TV. So I was haunted by the failure to launch comedy TV. And so I had done a few other things. In fact, after I left Capitol Hill, I had a contract to write a book on transatlantic politics, and then I did a follow-up on European politics. So I had done some things in addition to speech writing and all that. But the self-help book was not, it was out of my comfort zone. So I made the promise, and I'm happy I did. I'm happy I brought my mother some measure of happiness. She says it made her very happy that I would do that book. So that's, so there, your question was, how do I follow through? I don't make a promise for everything. I don't, but I do have on my wrist, I carry a rubber band, and this is a reminder of a promise, or it could be, you could have a couple of promises. And if you have negative thoughts about the promise, or if you have any negative thoughts at all, I always give myself a little snap. That keeps me going. That's sort of like, stop. It's like an NLP, neuro linguistic programming mechanism. It's a little, all right, stop doing that. Stop having that negative thought. Get back on track. So I recommend everybody have a little rubber band. LeBron James, the famous basketball legend, has a promise story in my book, Harness Your PromisePower. A lot of promise stories. It's not just my promise story. It's LeBron James, for instance, who has a band called I Promise on his wrist. And it's a reminder to him, constant reminder about his promise, which was to help the community he came from, to give back to the community. And so he has this ongoing promise that he has a wristband. It's written up in,
Love it.
I don't know if he has a book about it. I think he has on his website, he has an I Promise website or something. I came across that story in the Cleveland newspaper fairly recently. But there are all these promise stories that are in the book that I hope will be inspiring to people, help them take that next step to keep, it's one step at a time, right? You don't write a book. I always say, how did Tolstoy write War and Peace? One word at a time. You don't just write it. It just doesn't happen by magic. It's always one word at a time.
Word at a time.
Do you see patterns in those high achievers in their stories? Like as the book was coming together, where you're like, oh, I see some, across the board similarities.
Well, promise power is based on the idea of, and the way I see it, these are personal empowerment promises. I urge people to turn an important goal into a heartfelt promise, because you're more likely to keep your word. People don't like breaking their promises. I don't know if I said this already, but I always say it. You can change a goal. You can abandon a New Year's resolution with impunity. Nobody, people kind of joke about New Year's resolutions. I forgot about that. There's a Quitter's Day, the second Friday in January is Quitter's Day.
Yeah.
We almost applaud you for
being really big on Quitter's Day, because you're going to help everybody turn those goals into heartfelt promises.
So you can abandon a New Year's resolution, but you can only break a promise, and people don't like breaking promises.
Give us the how on that, because my head isn't going there. Like, how do I turn a goal into a heartfelt promise?
Well, it's called jujitsu. I call it, do a little jujitsu on the goal. So you have a goal. Maybe it's an important goal. You've written books and you've created a company and you do all kinds of wonderful things. Your new book on peace is great. So, if you just have that goal and then you say, I want to lock myself into this. I'm going to tell someone I care about that I'm going to make a promise. And I think of I promise as 2 magic words. I promise I'm going to finish this book. You might put a timeline on it or not, but you're going to do it. I promise. That's going to lock you into it in a way that setting a goal doesn't. Why? Why is a promise so much more powerful? I'll answer that question. A promise comes from the heart. A goal is more cerebral. A resolution, pros and cons, you weigh the, I want to lose 10 pounds because this, that. But a promise comes from the heart. There's emotion behind it. And Jack Canfield, in his amazing foreword to the book, it's not a 3-paragraph forward. It's like 10 pages or
It's
something.
an amazing forward. I was like, Jack, you researched this, buddy.
Yeah.
He's got some things to say. It starts out with the immortal words, a promise is a promise.
Yeah.
And he said, I've always known that since childhood. We've known that there's something special, something uniquely powerful about a promise from childhood. You mentioned my kindergarten years. We've known that when I would say to a friend, let's do the inflation, give me 50 cents. Back then it was a nickel, but give me 50 cents and I'll pay you back. And what does the friend always say? You promised, right?
I have that
They
written
call
down.
you on it.
I have it written down right here. I wanted you to talk about that famous sentence, I promise I'll pay you back. And when people break that promise, it is so the trust gets go there for me. Talk about broken promises. I'm not sure I'm going to phrase that right.
It's devastating to the person I think most people, it's, in the 90%, 95% want to keep their promises, and they feel badly if they don't. There's a story in the book about a teacher who had promised the class that they would go on a field trip before the end of the semester or something, before the end of the year. They go on a field trip to the zoo, I think it was. And things got busy, got hectic. They were behind. And the teacher said to the class, I think they were, 7, 8-year-old, I'm sorry, but we can't do the field trip. How many times did she hear, but you promised?
It's hard for kids.
And
it's
so
very hard.
The kids know you promised. So the teacher said, well, you're right. Okay, you're right. I'm sorry. We'll do the field trip. I promised. So people want to keep their word, and they're disappointed in themselves. That's why I say make a promise to someone you care about. That's one way. And I have in the book what I call the anatomy of a promise, in which there are 3 basic ways to make a promise to someone you care about, to yourself, or to a God or deity. You care about all 3 of those things. And in many ways, it's all about making a promise to yourself. If you have some integrity, you're going to keep your word. You're going to be worried about not keeping your word. But if you make a promise to someone you care about, that gives you a leg up. It gives you an accountability buddy. Even though my mother had passed away, I knew I'd made a promise to her, and she was my accountability buddy. It was more powerful knowing I had made a promise to her the last time we spoke than if she was still around for 5 or 10 years. We knew when I made the promise, she wouldn't see the dedication. That was even more powerful. So I tell people, I was on another podcast and someone said, well, my mother's already passed away. You were lucky. You made a promise to your mother before she passed. And I said, you can make a promise to her right now. Make a promise to your mother. It's just as powerful. Okay. So anyway, a promise is powerful in it. And Jack Canfield talks about that in his foreword. John Assaraf, a name you might know, a best-selling author. Yeah. He told me a promise story, an interview with me about a promise he made to his 2 sons. I won't, spoiler alert, I won't tell what the promise is. You can read the book. But it was a powerful promise that brought him to tears when he talked about it. Just like it's like promises come from the heart, I'm telling you, and they're much more powerful than a goal or a resolution or an intention or what other words do we use? So I recommend that people turn important goals into heartfelt promises.
Love it.
Matthew, you have a concept called a promise a day. Can you talk about that?
Right. That's a really interesting thing. We're right in the middle of a countdown now to Make a Promise Day, which is May 4th. And I came up with this idea of a holiday called Make a Promise Day. And people always ask, why is it on May 4th? And it really is kind of a silly reason, but I think it's worth mentioning. I wanted to be able to say, may the 4th be with you.
I was going to say, you're a Star Wars guy.
Yeah, and Star Wars, and it was not, when I thought of it, it wasn't known as Star Wars Day. but I want to have local jurisdictions and institutions and countries pass a proclamation and make a Promise Day proclamation. That's part of what I'm doing now. I want to spread this idea, and I've made a promise to spread the idea of Make a Promise Day to millions and millions of people around the world. And so we're in this countdown to Make a Promise Day, which will be the official release date for my book. But the book's already available, but I'm calling it the official release day. So, yeah, a promise a day is in the book, 30 days to a promising future. And it's every day there's a promise, a suggested promise that some of them I made up, some of them I've borrowed from an author. It's actually an organization called The Optimist, not Society, but The Optimists. They have the Optimist Creed, and there's a series of promises, but I change it around a little bit, and I say every time you have to repeat the words "I promise," and then you say the promise. And one of them that I feel that I put in there, I think is really important one. It kind of relates to your peace project, and that is, I promise to live by the golden rule and treat others as I want to be treated myself. I promise to live by the golden rule. That's a different way of, we know there's a golden rule, many people do, but to say you promise to live by the golden rule and treat others as you want to be treated yourself, that's a more locked in kind of commitment as opposed to not. And so there are lots of promises in that promise a day. I urge people to write them down, write them, repeat them to themselves on any given day. Make up a different promise if that doesn't grab you, if that one I suggest doesn't grab you. But I think it's a really powerful way to get in the habit of saying I promise to do something and not just take out the garbage. I promise to do something pretty powerful. There's another promise that also relates to the peace project that you have. And I think promises and commitments to live more peacefully are connected here. But there's a quote that's often attributed to Mahatma Gandhi, but there's some doubt about whether he actually said it. He may have said something like it, but I like the promise. I promise to be the change I want to see in the world. I promise to do that. And I think there are ways to build promises into goals that organizations have, whether it's a corporate or a nonprofit. I promise to do these things to support this mission. I think that's a much more powerful way to get things done.
So when people say, I promise, go with me here for a minute. And Katie, maybe you can answer this too. If people say, I promise to you, for example, or to somebody, and in the past, they've had so many broken promises by multiple people, or they've lived long enough to have promises broken and stuff. Do they trust you automatically less when the words I promise come out of your mouth? Or do you understand what I'm saying? Are they skeptical of you saying I promise because they've been hurt before?
Is this for Katie? Dr. Katie?
Yeah, it could be for Katie. Katie, that might be for you. Take it away, Katie. Well,
that's pretty complicated.
It is though, but it's true.
Because what comes with it is forgiveness.
Yeah.
And if you have been betrayed and you've had layers of betrayal and you haven't forgiven yourself or others, then it's much more difficult to trust. So a promise is something, as you beautifully say, Matthew, from the heart. And if your heart's been broken multiple times without letting go of those past hurts, it's very difficult to accept a promise, to believe a promise.
Right.
But it's important because it's part of healing.
Right.
That's a really cool thing to teach the healing part of broken promises. I'm really interested in that because so many people are rocked by that. I promise to, cherish you till death do us part, but here we are in divorce court. Am I going to trust anybody ever again? And that kind of thing. There's a lot of different variations of that, including I promise to pay you back and don't get it. So,
Right.
I love that because not everybody is open to hearing the promises. And
I have another
training for people might be really wise. Yeah.
I like bringing out the healing part. Apropos that, I think Jack Canfield in his foreword actually addresses a little bit of this by saying that the law of attraction comes into play. If you keep focusing on the broken promises, you're going to get more of those. So the idea here is to focus not on the broken promises, focus on the healing with their broken promises in the past, or all the promises that people do keep.
And one of the things your book beautifully says is you can heal and you
Yeah.
can promise and you can believe in promise. And it's very powerful when you do.
And if you've had trouble in the past keeping promises, I do have 7 tips. I like 7 letters in promise, by the way. 7 letters in promise, 7 letters in failure, 7 letters in success. 7 tips. I won't go through all of them, but one of them is to start small. You don't take on too much. If you're trying to kind of rehabilitate your promise muscles, start small. Don't promise somebody don't promise yourself that you're going to run a marathon tomorrow when you've never done that before, or you're going to lose 50 pounds in a week, or start small. Do a couple of small steps. We talked about writing a book, one word at a time. Take small steps toward promises. I love the idea, and I'm going to jump away from the 7 tips, but it's buried in the 7 tips in the book. I love the idea of combining a promise, a heartfelt promise, with a day that's already special in the calendar. And right after Make a Promise Day, there's Mother's Day. Why not make a promise to your mother on Mother's Day? And so you have this accountability buddy, but you also have the emotion of Mother's Day. So give your mother flowers and a promise. Why not do both? So make a promise to your mother on Mother's Day. Make a promise to your father on Father's Day. And the thing that I write about in the book is, how about on your own birthday? Why are we blowing out candles and making wishes? Why not? You could do both. Make a wish and a promise. Blow out the candles and tell the people, your assembled family and friends, I promise to quit drinking, or whatever it is. I promise to finish the book I've been jabbering about for 3 years. I promise. And make that on your birthday until you actually hitch your wagon to a more emotional star. You're gonna make that promise because that emotion is there pushing you forward. It's better do it on your birthday. Do it on Make a Promise Day, I hope, but also on your own birthday. And there are other days, special days in the week. Easter, if you're of that faith, or some other days, you can make a promise on these special days and have even more emotion behind the promise.
So if everyone listening made one meaningful promise to themselves today and truly honored it, how do you think that could impact not just their life, but the world around them?
One promise at a time changes the world. One person, one promise at a time. Now, their promise might be fairly small. That's fine. But promises are a uniquely human way of ordering the future. That's not me. That's Hannah Arendt who said that, philosopher, historian. If you want to find a way to order the future, it's uniquely human way to make promises. Promises are uniquely human. So I worked at NATO, and the Secretary General gave a speech in which he talked about NATO as this alliance of countries that made promises to each other to come to their mutual defense. It's a defense alliance, but they made a promise to come to each other's defense in support of freedom and democracy. And that's a powerful way to look at NATO. It's a powerful way to look at how you can change the world with these powerful promises, one person and one promise at a time. So I think organizations can start to make promises, make them, people voting. I don't care what your party affiliation is or who you like in the next presidential or congressional elections. You can make a promise to vote. Why not? I mean, that's our civic duty. Make a promise to get out and vote and participate. Democracy, as it's a kind of cliche, but democracy is not a spectator sport. It's something we can be active in. Making a more peaceful world is not something you can just stand by and watch other people do it. Make a promise to be on the side of peace or helping with climate change or whatever it is. Make promises can change the world.
What's one of your new promises?
Well, I have a promise to complete my trilogy, get the Harness Your Habit Force book done, promote this book, this concept of promise power. So there are several embedded in that, and they're all part of this rubber band. To get these things moving. If I have the trilogy in place, then I can go forward to potential clients and in the world at large and talk about this triad empowerment system that it's a framework for how you empower people. So what really motivates me and gets me charged up is empowering others. So empowerment, get this trilogy done and go out and take this on the road, one book at a time, and then hopefully all 3 books.
Perfect.
And go out and talk about these things and spread the word about empowering people by whether it's habit force or promise power or turning stage fright into stage delight. That's one of the ideas that I have with the joy of public speaking, from stage fright to stage delight.
Well, I promise that all of the 3 of us are going to do a book signing together with both of our
Wow.
books. I can
Wow,
just
that's
see
great.
it as we're sitting here. I'm like,
I've got an itchy trigger
yeah,
finger.
they go
And
hand in hand.
we've got our peace bracelet,
Got my
so
bracelet.
I'll use it for that. I agree.
Yeah, wouldn't that
That's
be fun?
wonderful.
Where are you?
Promise.
I'll have to find out more about where you are, but with that, I think we're gonna make that happen. Wouldn't it be fun to
Yeah.
go? But yeah,
Yeah.
the books are
I
in
love it. I'm in Ohio,
Osprey
if
Tree.
that
Yeah,
matters.
yeah, we love Ohio. We're good.
Yeah.
Ohio, definitely
Yeah.
then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're there.
Oh, good.
Okay.
That's great.
Yeah, no, that'll be fun. Katie, before we close out, because we're at an hour, did you have anything more to ask? Because I'd like to ask you to come on again, because we can go on and on and on and talk about things, and I love having guests on like that. I love it too when people quote other people and know it's just a thing of mine. So it's fun. Anyway, thank you for
I've
being.
got a great JFK quote. I'll tell you later.
Yeah, yeah.
It's all
I love
about
people who can
fulfillment,
talk in quotes. It's
happiness.
amazing.
Now, just if Matthew has anything left, any more pearls to offer our listeners.
No, I think we've covered it. I'm surprised that it's been an hour because it only feels like 15 minutes. I mean, it doesn't,
Yeah.
the time just flies. But pearls of wisdom, I'm trying to think of anything that I mentioned the JFK quote. I guess I could mention that because this is not Sorensen. It's JFK at a press conference. I saw it years ago on TV, not live, but later. And he was asked by a member of the press if he enjoyed being president. And he responded that he does. And he said that it comes from what he called the Greek definition of happiness. And I think it might be a paraphrase of Aristotle, but the Greek definition of happiness is the full use of your powers along lines of excellence. And he said that the presidency gave him the ability to do that, to make the full use of his powers along lines of excellence. That's happiness. That's fulfillment. That's when I talk about the joy of public speaking and empowering others. I fall back on that idea of the full use of your powers, reaching your peak potential. And I love that as happiness, because some people say, well, what is your definition of success? And I know you have a book on success, but I think of it as happiness.
We're similar. Mine is the smile on your face.
Yeah,
That's success.
exactly.
It's pure, and it comes from our son Cameron, who was a baseball player, being interviewed, and he was like, the measure of my success is my smile. I'm like, there it is. That's it all day long, is your smile. So out of the mouths of babes,
Exactly. Yeah, that's the point. I guess if that's a pearl of wisdom, I love that. And I think that's what I think should motivate all of us to bring more smiles and more happiness, more joy, more empowerment.
Katie really wanted to share her promise too. We didn't do it yet. So Katie, share your promise. This is so cool. And let me just introduce it just a second. It's the foundation for Katie. For everything, Katie, is this next thing. And I just Katie, go for it. And what I'm going to do is just caution listeners that if it upsets you in any way, I just want you to know that it's coming. So I think that's a good way to do it, right, Katie? Does that work? Yeah, because there's all this.
And I know I'm not supposed to use certain language, so I'm going to use
use it anyway.
language.
I just cautioned everybody. So yeah, go for it.
So my greatest teacher was a 17-year-old with cancer, and on his deathbed, I promised him I would dedicate my entire life's work to him.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Oprah had called him when he was dying and said to him, the purpose of life is to make a difference.
Right.
30 years later, a little guy, 8 years old, 3 days before he died, said the exact same thing to his mother. The
Right.
purpose of life is to make a difference. And when his mother went, "Well, how did you know that and I didn't?" He said, "You did, Mom, but you grew up." So
Wow.
my promise has dedicated my life to helping people learn what those two dying people knew to
Right.
make a difference
Make a
every day.
difference. Yeah. Well, I love that. Promise stories that can help to inspire so that we don't have a conversation about broken promises. And we have
Right.
a conversation about promises fulfilled
Right.
and
Yep.
making a difference in the world. That's the kind of conversation that we should always have.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah, I
love that.
remember way back when arriving, Katie and I have each been married to our respective spouses for coming up on 30 years. And I remember meeting mine, and he said to me, I was a little broken and not healed and just, yeah, a mess. And he said, "I promise I've got you."
Oh,
I was 29 and I didn't exactly know everything that was, but I was going through some health things, and we didn't know about my life-threatening food allergies. We didn't know what they were. But he looked at my dad and promised him. So my dad
wow.
said, "Look, something's up. She either has epilepsy or something's up. We need to take her to the Mayo Clinic." And turned out to be my life-threatening food allergies that I have on board. I have 4 life-threatening food allergies. And
Wow.
he said to my dad,
Wow.
"I promise you, we will figure it out and I will take phenomenal care of your daughter." I think through that, through somebody believing in me in that moment, I began to take better care of my own self and not feel so scared and things like that. But it's been a really interesting process of healing and being married and healing and being, just it's a pretty cool relationship, but I'm pretty grateful for my husband. I think
Well,
there's
that's also a promise story that could be
yeah, we come at you with our hearts and a lot of
put
love.
into the future book,
Yes.
or I could use it when I give a talk on promises. You're
Yeah.
giving me more stories. And that's how Jack Canfield got started. He had
Yes. More
collected a lot of
stories than he
these
knew what to do with, didn't he?
stories and he was
Yes.
telling
Yep.
stories, and he got more stories. And then he got a book together. And in fact, the publisher required that they have promissory notes. They had notes from people promising to buy the book. 20,000 the publisher required. So
That
he collected these promises, and the publisher
promised.
promise got that book off the ground.
Yeah.
And he also tells the story of a promise he made in his foreword. So
Well, they're
promises
our
are
same publisher, you know that, right? The
no, I
publisher
didn't.
yeah, we're over in Jack Canfield's camp with HCI,
I
that's our
see.
publisher, and you couldn't have 2 bigger fans of Jack Canfield, like, jumping out of my seat when you say Jack Can and now you too, because 'cause you're so cool, but,
Well,
it's
yeah, it's
amazing.
amazing. Yeah,
Yeah, he's
Yes.
that is
Yeah.
amazing, and
it's a small
congratulations to
world.
you.
Yeah, he I've spent some time with Jack and I've had him on my podcast. I haven't been able to, like, fly out and do all that stuff with him, but I've
Right.
spent enough time that with him that I just absolutely adore him, and
Yeah.
one of his people, Jody, is married to one of my dear, dear friends, Dr. Ivan Meisner,
I
and
see.
so you
Okay.
know
So
Dr. Ivan yet?
I don't, but are we still recording?
Yeah, we are.
Because
This is our part where we talk and people learn from our little background, so you
because
record.
I want to say more nice things about Jack.
Yeah,
No,
please do.
it's an amazing thing that he did. I never told him this, but when he said he would do the forward, and I knew the forward had been written, I made a promise to myself that I would get this book published one way or another. I
Yeah.
had this forward from Jack Canfield, and I was going to get it published, and I didn't tell him. I didn't put that much pressure on him. I made a promise to you, Jack, but it was a promise to myself
Yeah.
that I would get this because of Jack, because he believed in this. I believed in it more, even through some trials and tribulations. I knew I would get this done
Yeah.
because he believed in it. So
Yeah,
that was a
I
big
had
help.
some huge moments of doubt when I was putting up the Change Guidebook and the Success Guidebook, just incredible moments of doubt, and especially with speaking and podcasting and things like that. And he said, "You're already doing it," kind of thing. He just is he's so empowering. So anyway, yeah, Jack, we're loving on you.
Yeah,
So I'll send this to Jack, and I'm
that would
sure
be great.
and yeah, he's a great human. So I don't know of I really don't know of anybody who ever has said anything about him other than they love him. So I hang around with the I Love You Jack Canfield crew. So it's a great crew.
Right. What's not to like? He's
Yeah,
such a great, yeah,
exactly. So,
yeah.
human. So, I would like to say before we go, the name of your book again, and, so you've got a bunch of them. So I'm gonna read them all again. So Harness Your Promise Power, Change Your Life, Transform the World. And then there's that tried and true one, The Joy of Public Speaking that we all know and love. And then a revamp of Harness Your Habit Force is coming. And I love your website. It's your name on it, which I'll spell out in the show notes for everybody and so
Let's
forth.
hear.
And you did did you do the rebranding on that? You had mentioned you were gonna is it gonna change or did it
Yes.
change already?
No, it's changed to the
It looks
Empowerment Pro.
beautiful.
I
I'm like,
was
"What's
the
changing?"
Podium Pro. I was the
Yeah,
Podium Pro for many years
Great
because
name.
my focus was more on public speaking
right.
and the podium. And even though I think it was personal empowerment, these other books fit in better with the Empowerment Pro. So I'm now rebranding myself as the
Yeah.
Empowerment Pro.
Okay, so that I'm gonna be honest with you, when you said that to me before, I was like, "Wait, I'm not caught up with you yet. Like, I don't know you well enough yet that I need to go back and have you teach us to speak maybe and be your podium pro again." So do you wear both hats if we
Oh
need you?
yeah, I still do the
Okay,
yeah.
good. 'Cause
On the website, there are 3 parts, tripartite thing. Speaking, the triad empowerment system is habits, speaking, and promises.
yep, okay.
And they come together with this idea. We go back to it. I think I mentioned it. Success is an inside job. It's
Yeah,
all about these inside mental shifts, mindset shifts. And I talk in the speaking domain about stage fright to stage delight. And I also talk about the gentle art of mental joy jitsu, not jujitsu, joy jitsu. And
of
it's
course you do. That's
there are
perfect.
certain things you can do to bring joy to yourself, and that has to do with left brain, right brain, whole brain speaking, as I call it. So if you tap into the right side of the brain, that's where joy is. That's where Luther King's "I have a dream" is all right brain. That speech. A dream doesn't fit onto a spreadsheet. A dream is not
There's a
something
Matthew
you could
quote.
quant.
That's a dream doesn't
Why?
fit
Why
onto
is
a
dream? But a
spreadsheet.
dream grabs
Amen.
you, just like
Yes.
the word promise grabs you.
Yeah.
So that's the right side of the brain, and that's what people and stories grab people. That people remember stories. So
Mhm.
that's if I say anything about public speaking is tell more
Tell a
stories.
story.
And
Yep.
then you're gonna get this because it's today. Are you in the mood to write TED Talks for people or coach people on helping write TED Talks? Because I could see that coming at you all day long.
I would love to do that. I would love to give a TED talk. I haven't done that, and I haven't done a TEDx. You're already talking TEDx or TED.
Whatever. Yeah, just
Yeah.
TED Talk.
Yeah, TED Talks are I have to probably sell a few more million books to get
Yeah.
the attention of the TED
Don't we
people.
all? Yeah.
But, yeah, I'd love to do some coaching on that. I think people tend to be trapped in the left side of the brain when they give speeches too much.
Mhm.
And so what you wanna do is I refer to as let go of the trapeze because that's where the magic is. You let go of the trapeze. If you just swing back and forth on a trapeze, people get, what's this person doing up there? You got to let go of the trapeze once in a while. And that means be spontaneous. And that means tap into the right side of the brain. Use words like imagine, picture this, imagine this, and have a dream. Don't plagiarize Martin Luther King, but dream is, that's what Mahalia Jackson was telling him when he was giving the speech. Tell him about the dream, Martin. Tell him about the dream. Because the first half of his speech was, frankly, a little too left brain. And she was right behind him saying, tell him about the dream. And he shifted halfway through the speech and he started talking about, I have a dream. It's like people's hearts went soaring. And that's when people said, I love this speech. The first part of the speech was about, he referred to promissory notes and, checks and things. It was really great, uh, uh, great metaphors, but they weren't the dream. And so that when he got fired up, he had given versions of the dream speech before. And that's what Mahalia Jackson was saying. Tell him about the dream. And so he did. What a speech. And so, yeah, I would be delighted to do that kind of thing with people who want to make a difference. We go back to what it's about, making a difference in the world.
Yep.
That's what I'm all about. I'd love to be able to do that. And I've done it in different settings, for different people, different jobs, clients along the way. But now I'm a little bit more, I think I have a little bit more of a platform of books and training programs, frameworks. I do want to do online courses and stuff like that, but I just haven't gotten around to it.
Yeah. Well, you are you, so it ought to be amazing. So, and we're grateful for you. We're so happy to share these moments with you and learn from you. And we wish you all of the success in promise format with your books. And Katie, is there any last words for Matthew?
No, sincerely, Matthew, so wonderful.
Yeah.
Love your concept. And it fits beautifully with the Make a Difference promise I made. And I think everybody needs to just promise themselves that they'll do their best.
Yeah. It's all you can do.
All you can do.
Well, best ever you, and do the best you can do, and make a difference in the world. Promises, I think, are a tool for that to happen. I think of it as the new frontier in personal change and achievement. Promise power.